Hey everyone, Muneeb here, founder of Stacks. Good to be here. Before I start my talk, I wanted to give you a little bit background on myself. So I grew up in Rawalpindi. Most of you know that as a small, sleepy army town. And I kind of like got interested or fell in love with computers when I was like 15 or 16 and got my first computer. And we would basically started looking under the hood, like how did these things work? Discovered the internet, in the mid or late 90s or so. Did my undergrad at LUMS, and after that, I did a PhD at Princeton University. So most of my life, like especially the time towards the undergrad days at LUMS and afterwards, I've mostly been a computer science researcher, working on internet protocols. Basically from the angle of, I really like technology that actually gets commercialized so that you can have an impact on the real world and you're not just kind of like innovating things for the sake of innovating them in a research lab and they never kind of like escape the lab. Very interestingly, towards the end of my time at Princeton, I, through various kind of like chances and occurrences, basically stumbled upon the crypto industry, which was very early at that time. I don't know if you guys follow Bitcoin and the other cryptocurrencies, but Bitcoin was, basically $90 or something at that time, right? It was a very small industry and a very big breakthroughs were happening over there. And I stumbled upon it because I was looking for certain kind of like technical solutions for the type of problems we were trying to solve. We were working on kind of like building next blockchains actually provide really elegant solutions for that. And since then, it's been a roller coaster ride because this is by far the most disruptive thing that I've ever seen in my life. This thing can be bigger than the internet, and I actually have no doubt that it would be bigger than the internet and would have a bigger impact on society than the internet itself. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a very brief kind of like overview of crypto. Like it's a very complicated technology. So I'm going to try and simplify it as much as possible. I'll try to stay at a very high level, and I'll give you a little bit background of the internet itself, right? Like what was different early on, what's this thing called Web 2.0, and what is this next generation internet that everyone's excited about. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what we do at the Stacks project and highlight some key things. So let me share the slides and let's get started. All right, so as I said, I'm going to talk about crypto and the next internet. You can find me on Twitter at Muneeb, and I'm happy to kind of like respond to any questions after the talk. Quickly, first, just want to give a disclaimer. We are actually in a situation where we did a SEC qualified offering last year. We raised around $23 million through that offering, and in total, we have raised around $70 million for the project earlier. But this is just a disclaimer that this presentation is just for information purposes. This is not an offering for any securities or tokens, and there might be some forward-looking statements here. We have to follow strict US regulations, so I kind of like need to give you this disclaimer. All right, so I think at a very high level, try to think of the internet as not some technology that aliens built and we just use it, and it is not something that can be improved. The internet is actually a pretty old, clunky technology at this point, right? It was the bulk of it was invented like 30, 40 years ago, and it hasn't evolved that much. And what I'm talking about today is basically there have been several efforts to drastically upgrade the internet, almost like build a new one. And at least from a research perspective, those efforts have never gone anywhere. But for the first time in history, since the early internet, we actually now have a real shot of pretty much like replacing the internet or upgrading it in a drastic manner. And people call it Web 3, and it's going to be radically different from the internet that we are used to. Let's break it down a little bit more. It is going to be radically different in two concrete ways. The first aspect is financial assets. If you think about the internet right now, yes, you can do emails, you can log into different websites, but there's no concept of digital assets online. Like imagine things that you can own, right? Like you directly own them, you can transfer them around, you can do interesting things with it, but there are no like these digital objects that are under your direct ownership. This is not a situation like the real world, like the physical world, where you can own a house, you can own a car, you own different things in your house. That is not possible online. But with Web3, that's possible. So you have the concept of digital ownership. You can directly own things with a private key. I wouldn't go too much into the technology, but let's just try to understand the concepts at this point. Bitcoin itself, some of you might have heard about Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is a new type of a sovereign money, meaning that it is a type of currency that is not controlled by any government at all, right? So no one can change the supply of it. It's backed by mathematics and computer science, and it's a type of a digital asset that you can own. And then Bitcoin is like one type of a digital asset. There are other things as well that you can do. So you can imagine that once you digitize these things, once you can have a digital dollar or a digital rupee or Bitcoin, which is actually a much better store of value, people can start to program these things. They can actually start building new types of financial products, new types of trading platforms, new types of basically innovative things that were not possible before. And that is something that is being enabled by Web3. The second track is very different. The second track doesn't have to do that much with the financial markets and the financial side of things, but basically it has more to do with decentralized applications. So what are decentralized applications? Most of us are used to using Instagram or Facebook or WhatsApp. These are all companies, right? And in this case, actually owned by a single company, Facebook. Facebook owns Instagram, Facebook owns WhatsApp as well. And when you're talking with your friend, you're actually going through Facebook, the company. Facebook is running the servers. They can actually see everything you do. They track you. They try to show you ads and basically make money off of this. Whereas on the internet, this Web3, this new type of a next internet, what happens is that there are no large companies in the middle. The applications are decentralized, they're owned by the users, and users are directly in control of their data. Meaning, and by the way, these things are live. This is not theoretical. These things have been built and at the early stages of user traction. So if I'm using an application on Web3 that is decentralized, I can look up my friend, send my friend a message or share a picture in a direct peer-to-peer connection, and there's no company in the middle. So those are kind of like the high-level concepts, two different tracks. One is about crypto economy and financial products, and the other is around general-purpose decentralized applications. So let's look at the history of the internet a little bit. It all started with some of the base layers getting built, but Web 1.0 was really these websites, right? Like very simple static pages. Some of you would remember those days. I fondly remember them. This is the time in the 90s when I discovered the internet, and you would just stay awake all night, kind of like browsing through these different like wealth of information that was available. But it was not very interactive. It was basically static websites. An interesting thing that was happening is that there was the web community, the people who were kind of like building the Web 1.0 and the early internet, and then there was a crypto community, and these were a bunch of applied cryptographers who were working on security protocols or encryption, and they were largely disconnected. There wasn't a lot of overlap between them. I actually didn't even know about the crypto communities and some of the early ideas behind those communities in the 90s. I was mostly in the web community, much like most people who were kind of like basically learning about the web, and crypto was kind of like not something mainstream. And crypto actually went dormant for a while, like between 2000 and let's call it 2008 and so. There wasn't a lot of like new innovation happening. It kind of like just took a back seat. Whereas the web actually exploded. We got Google, we got Facebook, we got these interactive websites where people can now not only like read information, but actually actively participate, post data, and we started seeing the rise of Web 2.0. And in many ways, what's happening now is that we have this interesting intersection of crypto and the traditional web. Some of the early concepts of what we thought of as traditional crypto, meaning strong encryption, meaning the idea of a digital assets or money online, having private transactions, building these decentralized exchanges, or having your own kind of like identity online and owning it, all of that is kind of like merging with the internet itself. And this is what we call Web3. Right? So it's a very interesting time. Think of this as the single biggest upgrade to the internet as we know it. Right? So everything is about to change, or in many ways is already changing. Just that not a lot of people are currently aware of this next generation internet and how it's radically different and what kind of opportunities are available here. So very quickly, I think one of the downsides of Web 2.0 was that we actually gave up all of our data, right? Like our computers now are pretty much like dumb screens, and all of our data sits with Google or Facebook, and they effectively, it's like they track us everywhere we go, and it's in their business interest to do that, right? Like these companies, they actually live off on tracking you and basically showing you ads, which is a strange business model. Like this is not what people really signed up on the internet for. The internet was supposed to be for user freedom and for giving power to the users. And in many ways, it ended up doing the opposite of that, right? And Web3 kind of like fixes that, right? It's a user-owned internet, and that's a very, very kind of like radical shift. So how would this thing actually get built? Interestingly, over the last 10 years, a lot of the core protocols have actually been developed already. So I wouldn't go into the details of these protocols, but at a high level, basically think of this as there's Bitcoin. That is more like digital gold or a sovereign form of money. But the technology behind Bitcoin is super interesting, super fascinating, and it enables some of these applications. But there are also some other networks as well, like networks like Ethereum or other crypto protocols that are trying to enable a richer set of applications and smart contracts on top. And the work that we are doing, the Stacks project, and basically we enable all of that innovation directly on top of Bitcoin. Right? So think of this as early days of the internet where there's TCP/IP, but there are other smaller networks as well. So people don't know that are we going to get a single internet, or are there going to be multiple networks? So your application requires like some sort of a different capabilities. So you're building a network for your application as well. So we are pretty much in the camp that most of this is actually going to collapse on top of Bitcoin, because it is by far the most secure network with the most amount of kind of like compute power behind it, or the most amount of crypto capital already present there. And I think we will, just like TCP/IP became a standard and most people just started using the internet, we think the same thing is going to happen on top of Bitcoin. And that's the work that we do. So we actually bring the features that are not there on Bitcoin itself for building these applications, for building smart contracts, for building these decentralized type of use cases, and we add that on top of Bitcoin. And you can imagine that this was years and years and years of work. Like we have a team of computer scientists, mostly from Princeton, some of my colleagues, but also from MIT, Stanford, and other places. And over the years, we've actually been building those core protocols that enable these things. And this is a very exciting time for us, because the bulk of the work on the public infrastructure is actually coming to a completion. And we have a pretty large launch coming up in 2 months, where a lot of this functionality would be available to developers, and then we are pretty excited about it. So I want to quickly go over why we believe in Bitcoin versus trying to build our own separate network or trying to have a disconnected network there. Like, if you look at Bitcoin, it's already like one of the most secure networks on the planet. This graph is of the hash rate of Bitcoin. Just think of that as the compute power of Bitcoin. What looks like a flat line is actually exponential growth itself as well. So nothing like this has kind of like happened in the history of computing. Like where you have a network that is decentralized, no one controls it, and it's a self-organizing protocol, which is growing like crazy. The amount of hash power behind this network has been growing exponentially, right? It's already at a stage where it's extremely hard for even state actors, like even countries, to be able to try and take down this network. So it has a very strong base layer for building a truly decentralized internet on top. And it's not just that. Bitcoin now has $350 billion of capital. Right? So imagine like that's crypto capital. It's like programmable money. Bitcoin doesn't have the feature set to make kind of like Bitcoin programmable itself, like for example in smart contracts, or to use it in applications. But you can add that layer on top, and this is what Stacks do. This is what we do. We make Bitcoin from a passive asset to a programmable asset in smart contracts, and we make it usable in applications, and people can build all these different use cases on top of it. So we are extremely excited about this. As I said, I wouldn't go into a lot of the details of this, but at a high level, think of this as the work we do with Stacks is enabling smart contracts on Bitcoin, and that's kind of like enabling almost like a next generation internet on top of Bitcoin. So with that, I think I'll stop. You can basically go to blockstack.org to learn more, and you can always find me on Twitter. I'm at Muneeb. Hi.
Transition हो गई ना कि black.
Yep. Happy to take questions.
Hi, Muneeb. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Yep, I can hear you. Hi.
Hey, Muneeb. How are you?
Happy to take questions.
Hey, Muneeb. How are you?
I'm good. How's it going?
Hi, Muneeb. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Great. So, one of the questions we had for you was that a couple of years ago, there was a lot of hype around blockchain and how that's going to change the internet and change everything the way we know it. And then there was a sort of like a lot of disappointment right after that, which coincided with Bitcoin sort of crashing. So do you think that disappointment was justified? And how long do you think until we really start to see blockchain really impacting people's lives in a way that they can understand and really go like, wow, okay, this is really cool?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think one thing to understand about these markets is that they are highly volatile and they're highly cyclic, right? So I've actually seen the same cycle almost 3 times now. We're entering the 4th cycle, right? So I was personally not surprised at all when the price of Bitcoin actually crashed, because it has done the same thing 5 or 6 times before. And it's an extremely cyclic market. And basically what happens is that there's a lot of hype and excitement. A lot of people enter the industry. Some people actually discover the real innovation behind it, and they stick around. And the time when the Bitcoin price is actually it's a bear market is the best time for developers and builders to build cool things, right? And then the next cycle comes, and I think we're at the start of the next cycle. Bitcoin is already back to the peak of 2017. It starts to get attention again. But every time these cycles become bigger, and the industry basically grows in these cyclic things.
Awesome. And the other question that I think I'm sure a lot of people here in Pakistan would be really interested to know about is, if they are passionate, if they're curious about blockchain development, what are your suggestions? How do they get started, and how do they really get into the nitty-gritty of it?
Yes. So we actually launched the Stacks Pakistan chapter just this week. And I think it's a great resource because we effectively bring the programming language, it's called Clarity language that we invented, on top of Bitcoin, right? So if you want to learn how to program blockchains or how to actually program Bitcoin or build these applications, you can use that. And we have a local chapter in Pakistan now. Nabil is leading it, and then we are trying to do interesting things with local tech companies and even universities as well. So I would say that the intention of our Stacks Pakistan chapter is precisely education and to help form local communities here where people who want to learn about crypto, learn about Bitcoin, learn about programming these applications should be able to like self-organize and then get connected to the resources that we have internationally.
Awesome. And my final question to you is, in terms of people wanting to learn tech and development, there's also a lot of hype around big data and AI and ML. So what's your advice? Is there a link in when a developer or when people are learning about these different things? Should people focus on learning about blockchain or AI or both?
Yeah, so I think if you look at Silicon Valley, I would say the top two areas where a lot of really smart engineers are going to right now would be crypto and AI, right? So people are going into either they would try to go join a self-driving car company, or they would go join like some sort of a crypto startup that is building these smart contracts and so on. So I would definitely think that those are two areas where there's a lot of room for innovation. There's a lot of green field left. Like this is something that I felt where when I was working more traditional data centers or the early internet, I always had this feeling as if, all the work I'm doing is incremental. Like somebody else invented TCP/IP and we're kind of like doing incremental work on top. Whereas in crypto, it's like a rabbit hole and there's so much to do and things happen so quickly that I think I'm obviously biased. I would highly recommend people to basically see what's going on here. And you don't need to be just like a computer scientist or engineer for this, because it is really a combination of like open markets. So if you have an economics background or even like game theory, governance, other types of open source software, there are various very interesting different things that are converging in the crypto markets, and there are different skill sets that can be useful there.
From Shakib Shaida, who's asking, what's the tokenomics of STX tokens? Why should anyone hold STX tokens if the Blockstack blockchain is on top of Bitcoin? So a slightly technical question, but if you could take that.
Yeah, so Stacks is fuel for smart contracts, right? Bitcoin is, so the Stacks blockchain is separate. It derives security from Bitcoin, and the Stacks asset actually trades internationally right now. We have a 220 million market cap or so, and it's still like very early stages because Stacks 2.0 hasn't launched. Currently, the US markets are not open for trading and so on. But the Stacks cryptocurrency is very different. Think of that as it is the asset that is used as fuel for smart contracts. It's a little bit like, if there was a currency that you pay to Amazon to run computations, right? Whereas Bitcoin is something very different. Bitcoin is like digital gold, and there is a interlink between the two currencies. I would recommend you to kind of like check out our website and the white paper for more information on that.
For joining us, it's been a pleasure having you with us for 0 to 1 Disrupt. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.